These are illegal islands you can visit but people went anyway, part 1. Up first is North Sentinel Island. North Sentinel Island is one of the Andaman Islands and is home to an indigenous tribe. They are called the Sentinelese and they are an uncontacted tribe who allow no visit from the outside world. But in 2018, John Chow illegally traveled to the island in an attempt to convert the tribe to Christianity. And to no surprise, John was killed by the Sentinelese as they allow no contact with the outside world. John paid 2 fishermen $335 to take him near the island and the 2 fishermen were arrested. And it's also believed that John knew his fate as he wrote in his diary, "Please do not be angry at them, or God if I get killed. Don't retrieve my body." John tried to visit the island 3 times but failed the first 2 times as the tribe got mad at him. And on his last visit, John told the fishermen to abandon him on the island. And the fishermen later saw the tribe dragging John's body, and the next day they saw his body being buried on the shore. And some sources even claim that the Sentinelese people ate John's body. So whatever you do, you should never ever go to North Sentinel Island.
You ever heard about like creepypastas and shit like that?
Of course, yeah.
So there was a 13-year-old boy, right, who moved into a new town with his mother. He was used to getting bullied and stuff, like really, really bad and shit. In his new school, whatever, he was still getting bullied. But it got too extreme, bro. Like these kids were like, that ass hurt this mother. Right? This time it got too crazy to the point where like they lit him on fire and they threw bleach on his face. His eyelids got like up, but he has no eyelids. He basically woke up in the hospital, right? He looked into the mirror and he saw his new face and he just started laughing like manically. Yeah. And he was saying like, "I love my new face."
Yeah, that was probably him like literally being at that breaking point and just snapping. Like he was already getting bullied and shit.
And then he purposely carved like a permanent smile on his face.
Is his name Jeff?
Yeah.
As soon as you said like bleach on his face and it got fucked up, yeah, Jeff the Killer's face like popped up. But do you think like there's a real life person that was like that? Maybe like their face got destroyed and like they looked at their face and like started laughing because like, yo, I fucking love my face now.
I mean, we know that there are deranged, crazy people.
Yeah,
in the
for
world,
sure.
And a situation like that could literally either make you like completely depressed and sad and want to like just be completely on some. I'm already gonna get looked at as crazy and shit. I might as well just completely envelop that character.
It's basically what he did, and then he ended up one by one started getting revenge on all of them, and he killed them, bro.
You remember the JPEG one?
JPEG?
With the dog?
The smiling dog?
Yeah, cursed picture of the dog. I think it was like a JPEG or like a regular attachment sent to somebody on their laptop, and they just.
This former Disney and Better Call Saul actor was arrested and charged with sex crimes against children. This is Stoney Westmoreland. He's been in a bunch of movies and TV shows, and he's probably the most widely known for his role playing the grandfather of the children in the sitcom Andy Mack, which aired on Disney. In 2018, while the show Andy Mack was popular on Disney and Stoney was still filming for the show around children all the time, he was arrested. You see, Stoney had been communicating with someone who said they were 13 years old on the app Grindr for months. And Stoney actually traveled out of state to go meet up with this minor. However, when Stoney appeared at the motel to meet this child, he was met with an undercover officer who promptly placed him under arrest. Now, after all was said and done, Stoney was sentenced to a measly 2 years in prison for attempting to meet up with a 13-year-old boy. And thankfully, immediately he was fired from the sitcom that he was a mainstay on. But who knows, this probably isn't the last time we'll see this guy. As we've seen many times with these Hollywood people, after convictions like this, they seem to always be able to worm their way back into the industry somehow. But this is just a disturbing side note that I felt like nobody knows about and we need to raise awareness about. And if you want to listen to more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
This Florida frat boy got away with eating somebody's face, and it's all because he believed he was being chased by demons, apparently. He literally murdered both of the victims, who were a married couple, in their garage and then started chewing on one of their faces. This was the couple right here that he decided to kill and eat. This is Michelle and then John Stevens. The killer's name is Austin Haroof. This is him in his mugshot in 2016. This is him recently. So the trial ended recently and they found him not guilty because of an insanity plea. I think he knew exactly what he was doing because he also drank chemicals inside of their garage, which made him very, very sick and ill. This obviously would have thrown the trial off because he was so sick from this, and maybe this helped his insanity case. He was 19 years old, attending FSU at the time when he killed this couple. He also stabbed a neighbor that was trying to help them. Before the attack, he was eating dinner with his father when he started acting weird, and he walked 2 miles to his mother's house. When he got there, he mixed oil and Parmesan and tried to drink that, and then he stormed off again and went to the couple's house. This happened 45 minutes before the murder. He will be held in a facility until he's deemed to be released back into the public. The defense and the prosecution believe that will be never. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section below.
This is the scariest story about the family portraits. One day, there was a man who was hunting in the woods, and as night fell, he found himself in an unfamiliar part of the forest. He walked and walked, but he couldn't find his way home. Wandering aimlessly in the dark, he eventually came to a small clearing where an old ramshackle cabin stood. Tired and weary, he decided to see if he could stay there for the night. When he came closer to the cabin, he saw that the door was standing wide open. Poking his head inside, he could see that the little cabin was completely empty, but there was a bed and a fire burning in the fireplace. The hunter threw himself on the bed and decided to sleep there for the night. If the owner came back, he would ask his permission in the morning. Lying on the bed half asleep, he looked around and was surprised to see the walls were covered with paintings. They appeared to be family portraits, all framed and painted in incredible detail. They seemed very lifelike, and without exception, each portrait was uglier than the next. The hideous faces in the paintings made him incredibly uneasy. The way they were painted made it seem as if their eyes were staring directly at him. It was incredibly unnerving. He decided that the only way he was going to get any sleep was to ignore the hideous faces staring at him. So he turned on his side facing the wall and pulled the blanket over his head and drifted off to sleep. In the morning, when the hunter woke up to find the cabin completely lit up by sunlight, he looked around and noticed that there was no family portraits on the walls at all. There was only windows.
Real La Mata Bellas. Her name was Miriam Yuki Gaona Padilla. She was a woman who posed as a plastic surgeon in Guadalajara, Mexico.
Oh, she's botched.
A little reason why she looks like that is crazy as well. So back in the day, she was like a stripper, and she ended up getting involved with like dangerous people, including her boyfriend, who was a drug trafficker. And one day, they ended up getting doused with like gasoline and basically lit on fire. Her boyfriend ended up dying, but she just got like really, really bad burns. After that, she just disappeared. So a couple years later, she ends up coming back. Obviously, you can tell she got plastic surgery done. After that, she ended up opening up her own medical office, providing people services of plastic surgery for like a really, really good price, a cheap price, the natural way, no surgery done, and fast results. She would say that she would inject collagen into the patients. She got so known and so popular to the point where she would go on tours to different countries. People from Europe would come over to Mexico to get work done by her. United States people come over to Mexico to get work done by her. So it's estimated over 100,000 patients that she worked on. When the patients started reporting some problems, some of them started forming some lumps, she started gaslighting them, saying how, oh, it's normal, it's part of the procedure, I went through the same thing. But eventually it just got worse and worse and worse, to the point where people's skin would turn black, their skin would peel off. They ended up going to the doctors, and they ended up telling them that they got car oil injected into them, industrial oil, vegetable oil, anything that you wouldn't really want inside your body. I actually have some pictures of the patients as well.
Yo, I don't want to see this.
I'm sorry, bro.
This is the scariest song in the world, and here's why. Okay, so we all heard this song before, especially if you're into scary things and watch the Insidious movies. But do you know the very chilling and disturbing backstory behind this song? Well, the song is called Tiptoe Through the Tulips, and it was recorded and released in 1968 by American singer Tiny Tim. And when the song was first released, it did not have the scary reputation it has now. However, this would change during his last ever live performance of the song. On September 28, 1996, Tiny Tim suffered a heart attack that was pretty miniature while performing at a music festival, and after this happened, his doctors advised him that he wasn't healthy enough to perform again. However, Tiny Tim ignored the advice from his doctors and scheduled another concert at a women's club in Minnesota the next month. But right before his performance, he told his wife that he wasn't feeling good. Nevertheless, Tiny Tim decided to go on stage anyway. And after performing the last song of the night, he suffered a major heart attack on stage and died in front of the crowd. And the song he was performing was Tiptoe Through the Tulips. This song was already terrifying, but it's 100 times more terrifying after knowing this. Now listen to the song after knowing all this.
Former cop convicted of kidnapping and killing a 16-year-old who was walking home. This is Susanna Morales and Miles Bryant. So this is the 23-year-old officer that kidnapped this 16-year-old while she was walking home. He also murdered her. On June 13th, the judge found him guilty of several charges. They sentenced him to life in prison without the chance of parole. He was found guilty of murder, kidnapping, and then falsely reporting the murder. This happened in July of 2022. Then in February of 2023, somebody called into the police station saying that they found human remains in the woods. 2 days later, the remains were identified as Susanna Morales. Upon investigating the remains, they found Bryant's gun next to Morales' body. He reported the gun as stolen, but they were able to track it back to him. On top of all this, the two literally did not know each other at all, so they were not connected in any way possible. She was just walking home and he decided to kidnap and murder her. This happened in Lawrenceville, Georgia, but this is just insane to hear. This person definitely deserved life in prison. This is an unfortunate story because she was so young. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
This Brazilian YouTuber with 2 million subscribers took his own life before he could be exposed as the pedophile that he was. This is PC Sequeira. He was known for his appearances on Brazilian TV networks, his comic book coloring, and his interesting content. But right before Christmas last year, he posted this chilling clip. In this post, he wishes his followers a lonely Merry Christmas, and a few days later, he would be dead. PC was found by his girlfriend at the time. He was 37 years old, and he had taken his own life in his apartment in Brazil. But unbeknownst to a lot of people, in 2020, the authorities began looking into PC after child abuse images were found on his phone. And according to the authorities investigating this, he had shared these images out to other pedophiles. Now, interestingly, when you look up this guy, there are a number of articles that come up, but this one from the Daily Mail says he posted a heartbreaking Christmas message. And it makes no mention of the fact that he was under investigation for sharing CSAM or CP videos. Now, I don't know what happened with this investigation after he took his own life. I don't know if they followed up on the leads, but I definitely think the fact that he took his own life is related to the unfolding pedophile investigation that he was embroiled in. Eerily enough, his TikTok account is still up and running. It has been verified. TikTok refuses to verify me, probably because I talk about this stuff. And I don't know if we'll ever know the true story about exactly what they found on his phone, exactly how many images and videos, because I don't really know how investigations like this go in a country like Brazil. I recently spent a full month investigating and exposing a CP ring in Michigan, and this information is explosive, it's dangerous, and if you're interested in this sort of thing and want to help me raise awareness about it, you should go watch this video that I just posted on my YouTube. Here's my channel. If you're lost, you can just go to my channel and click on the most recent videos. But yeah, this is important stuff that we need to talk about because it's so prevalent, and if we don't raise awareness, this will continue to happen time and time again.
This is quite possibly the most brutal way somebody has ever died, and whatever you do, don't look up the pictures. Octavio da Silva was a 20-year-old soccer referee in Brazil, and on June 30th, 2013, he was refereeing a soccer game and sent off a player named Josmir Santos Abreu, who was 31 years old. He refused to leave the field and began a fight with the referee. Abreu threw a punch which made Octavio draw a knife from his pocket and repeatedly stab Abreu. Abreu died on the way to the hospital, and when fans watching the soccer game, including Abreu's family and friends, found out about his death, they invaded the field and stoned Octavio before decapitating him, and then ripping his limbs from his body with just their strength and no weapons, and then put his head on a stick in the middle of the field. And what makes this worse is that a graphic video surfaced online shortly after the incident, showing medical personnel reassembling Octavio's body. The videos and pictures are extremely disturbing, and I don't recommend looking them up. You will most definitely be traumatized or scarred. The way his limbs looked after being ripped off is extremely unsettling to look at, mostly because you see strings of flesh, tissue, and bone because it wasn't cut off properly, and it was just ripped off by pure strength of humans. This case is absolutely awful, but why did Octavio pull out a knife when somebody just punched him? If he didn't stab Josmir Abreu to death, he would most likely still be alive today. But just imagine being literally ripped limb from limb by an angry group of soccer fans, and there's literally nothing you can do as they pull your body apart.
This is the haunting last photo of Fiona Anderson, who was 7 months pregnant when she jumped to her death after killing her 3 other children. This story needs a massive trigger warning, so proceed with caution. On April 15th, 2013, 23-year-old Fiona was found dead in Lowestoft, England. At the time of her death, she was 7 months pregnant with her 4th child, and authorities determined that she died after jumping off the Battery Green parking garage. After her body was found, police went to her home, and it was there that they discovered another horrific sight. Tucked into Fiona's bed were the bodies of her 3 children: 3-year-old Lavina, 2-year-old Addie, and 11-month-old Kaiden. It was later discovered that Fiona had drowned them all in the bathtub, drew hearts on all of their bodies, kissed their foreheads, leaving behind lipstick marks, and tucked each of them into her bed with all of their teddy bears. Fiona then wrote notes all over the walls, with one note saying, quote, "I love them and I'm going to keep them safe," and another note that said, quote, "They're cuddled up together sleeping. They look so peaceful." Fiona then wrote all of their names on her body, including the name Eve, which was what she was going to name her unborn daughter. And then she was caught on surveillance video walking around Lowestoft holding a teddy bear just hours before she jumped to her death. During the investigation into why she would have possibly done this, authorities found that just the day prior, she had an argument with the kid's father after finding out that he was in a new relationship. During that argument, Fiona stabbed him, and although he did receive treatment at the hospital, he told authorities that he'd been attacked by a man on the streets. He said he did this because he wanted to protect Fiona and avoid the kids being taken away from her. But after the altercation, Fiona sent him a text that said, quote, "Say goodnight to your children. It's the last time you will see them." End quote. And that would be the last time that he would ever see or hear from Fiona or the kids again, as they were all found the next day. A torn-up letter was recovered at the crime scene that Fiona had written that basically said she was unable to cope with the situation involving the kid's dad, and that she planned on taking her kids with her because, quote, "A mother never abandons her children," end quote. What's absolutely horrible is that this could have possibly been prevented. The family was really known to CYPS, with child protection cases open against them all the way back to 2009 with Fiona's first pregnancy. In just 3 years, social services had visited the family more than 50 times due to concerns of physical and emotional neglect. Child protection plans were put in place and legal intervention was considered. However, no action was ever taken. According to social services, the family was considered hard to reach as Fiona refused to meet with them. And because of that, no mental health assessment was ever given to her, despite CYPS visiting them more than 50 times. Even though there were numerous red flags, everyone in the story was failed, and it's a story that we hear far too often. How do you not know that your 3 friends have been dead in your backyard for 3 days? And why would you not call the police? Everyone should be talking about this case because it's insane. On Sunday, January 7th, these 3 men went to their friend's house in Kansas City, Missouri to watch the Kansas City Chiefs football game. The men were Ricky Johnson, David Harrington, and Clayton McGeeney, and the house that they went to watch the game was being rented by their friend Jordan Willis. That was the last time that anyone ever heard from these men. After days of not being able to contact them, Clayton's fiance went to Jordan's home on the 5200 block of Northwest 83rd Terrace in Northland, and it was there that she discovered all of the men's cars still parked in the driveway, including Clayton's. After knocking on the door but receiving no answer, she eventually broke into the basement of the home, and she began loudly calling out for Jordan and announcing that she was there, but still she got no answer. After going further into the house, she discovered a dead body outside on the back porch, and she then called the Kansas City police. This all happened at around 10 p.m. on Tuesday night. When authorities arrived, they discovered 2 more dead bodies outside in the backyard, and unfortunately, they all belonged to Ricky, David, and Clayton. But this is where the story starts to get odd. It was only after police arrived that the resident of the home and the men's friend Jordan came out of a bedroom. But he reportedly came out really calm in his boxers and holding an empty wine glass as if nothing was wrong. Jordan then told police and later his family that it seems as though his friend simply froze to death, yet he never once called police to report the bodies. According to a Facebook post made by a friend of the 3 men found deceased, multiple people had been trying to call Jordan in the days following the men's disappearance, and he even reportedly read messages from people looking for them, but he never responded. The entire time that his friends were dead in the backyard, he was alive inside of his home, and he even ignored another friend pounding on his door for 20 minutes trying to locate the men. According to police, a cause of death for the men has not yet been determined, as they're waiting on autopsy and toxicology results, which could take weeks. But they did state that there were no obvious signs of foul play, and because of this, Jordan has not been arrested or charged with the crime. According to Police Sergeant Jake Bacina, although Jordan was initially cooperative the night the bodies were found, he doesn't know why he never contacted police to report what happened. Regardless, Sergeant Bacina has stated, quote, "This case is 100% not being investigated as a homicide," End quote. This has obviously made friends and family of the victims furious. None of them believe Jordan's story, and they're demanding answers. As of right now, the case is still ongoing. A search warrant is in the process of being obtained for Jordan's home, and authorities have recovered all 3 of the victims' cell phones to go through to try and piece together what happened that night. This case is very odd, and adding to the mystery is the fact that none of Jordan's neighbors heard or saw anything suspicious that night or in the following days. As for Jordan, he has reportedly moved out of the home since the incident, and I'm not sure if that's because he was forced to by police because it's considered a crime scene, or if his landlord evicted him because of the situation. Whatever reasoning he has not sat well with the public, and they think it's really suspicious. Jordan is a scientist working in experimental drug trials for HIV, and he's been described as incredibly intelligent but overall weird by the people that know him. Jordan also owns 2 dogs who he says are his life, and at this point, I'm not sure if the dogs were in the home while his friends' bodies were in the backyard, because if they were and he had taken them out, he would have for sure seen them, so that also adds to the mystery. If you have any information regarding this case, please contact 816-474-TIPS.
This guy is one of the most awful serial killers there has ever been, and I feel like he's never talked about. In my opinion, this guy's worse than Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer. Hi Meg, I talk about your crime. Let's get into the story of the Butcher, the worst serial killer Canada has ever seen. Robert Pickton was born October 24th, 1949, in British Columbia, Canada. Robert had quite a bad upbringing. His dad was very abusive. He actually grew up on a pig farm. From a really young age, him and his brother had to work countless hours on this pig farm, and then they were forced to go straight to school without taking a shower or anything. Because he was showing up to school unwashed, Robert started getting bullied, and they gave him the nickname Stinky Piggy. As Robert grew older, he was said to be very quiet, but he apparently sometimes had these weird bursts of bizarre behavior. These bursts would come out of nowhere, and he would just start acting really strange. In 1996, Robert's brother opened up a kind of charity thing. The charity was started to try to make more money for their pig farm. It was called the Piggy Palace Good Times Society. And what they would do is they would hold huge parties and raves to try and raise money. And I'm not joking when I say huge parties and raves. 17,000 people were said to have shown up at one point. 17,000 people at once. Sex workers and biker gangs would join these parties as well. But for Robert, it all started going downhill in 1997 when he attempted to murder a girl. I don't usually do this in these videos, but a lot of you ask what blush I use, and this is the blush I use. It's usually £10 on the TikTok shop, but it's on for $5 right now. So if you click right here, you can get it. I just ordered kind of a peachy version of this. I'm not being paid to talk about this. I just saw they were on offer, and you guys ask about these all the time. So get your hands on them for cheap while you can. So Robert attempts to murder a woman for the first time that we know of. According to her statement, he attempted to handcuff her, and then he started stabbing her multiple times before she managed to get away. This should have been the thing that got him on police radar, but he was able to get the charges dropped because the woman he attacked was on a lot of drugs at the time, and Robert used that to come up with a story. He told police, like, she was hitchhiking, I was just trying to help her, and she attacked me. And they believed him because she was on drugs. And unfortunately, for the next 60 women he would kill, he was let go. And he was able to come up with a strategy that wouldn't get him caught next time. He developed a plan and started killing a bunch of women. And Robert was really, really good at staying under the radar. Now, what did he do exactly? Let me tell you. Because it's disturbing. First of all, he always went for hitchhikers, addicts, or prostitutes. And what he would do is he would promise them money, drugs, accommodation, anything to get them back to his farm. Once he got them back, he would then shoot or strangle them to death. And this next part is why he was given the name the Butcher. He would take the victims' bodies, chop them up, and feed them to his pigs. Now, if you're not aware of this already, pigs will literally eat anything, everything. So the evidence was just, bye. They were getting rid of the evidence for him. All of a sudden, there is an increase in missing women in the area. But sadly, because he only went after sex workers or addicts or hitchhikers, no one cared. And this always makes me so mad with cases like these. Like, they're still human beings, but no bodies were showing up, so there was no crime. No body, no crime. But as the numbers started rising, people were kind of getting a bit worried. A group of people that weren't the police actually got a list together of all of the names of these young women who were missing. They brought that to the police and were like, do you see now? And that's when the investigation actually began into finding out what happened to these girls. And all of these girls had one person in common: Robert Pickton. He was the only person whose name continuously came up when they were looking for these girls. Police needed a way to get onto the farm with a warrant without him knowing about it and hiding all the evidence first. And so they heard that he had possession of an illegal firearm. And so they used that as the cover-up to get onto his property. On the property, they found multiple items that belonged to these missing women, along with some blood-stained clothing and tiny bone fragments. Now, things aren't looking too good for Robert, but because the pigs had eaten all the evidence, basically all of it, they were only able to charge him with the murder of 6 women. And so he got 6 counts of murder. When he got arrested, he actually said that he killed 49 women and that he was sad that he didn't get to round up to 50. What the hell, Robert? What does he want the police officer to say, like, oh, I feel so bad for you? No! He was arrested in 2002, and this trial was huge. Of course, he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. But guys, that's not the worst part of this story, because I'm getting to that now. One element of the story that I kept out until now is that Robert sold the meat of his pigs to people who lived around the area. These pigs, who ate the remains of 60 women, were sold to his neighbors. When I say neighbors, I just mean people who live in the area. So like secondhand cannibalism. I could never eat pig again if that was me. So yeah, they were pretty disturbed and freaked out by this information, which is totally understandable and just totally disgusting. After a huge search of his property, police now believe that the number of women Robert killed was in the 60s. 60 women. 60 mother, daughters, wives. It's insane. It really annoys me with cases like these. I know it was like in 2002 and things have changed, but have they? I find that a lot of cases like these that I cover always start with, oh, all these women were going missing, but they were sex workers, but they were drug addicts, who cares? And it's like, it's insane to me that like they're not seen as equals to any other woman walking on the street, but whatever. Hopefully that changes. And for those wondering, I have actually covered this story before, but the quality of the video was so bad that I couldn't keep it up anymore. Like, it really bothered me to watch back, so I thought I would remake it in a higher quality way. I hope you guys enjoyed it regardless, and have a wonderful day. My heart goes out to every single one of the victims, their families, and people who cared about them, and I hope Robert rots in jail. Anyways, this is not a good representation of Canadians. We're actually really nice people. I'll see you all in the next video. Love you guys. Bye.
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Okay, I have an honest question. Does anybody on here remember ElsaGate? Like the weird conspiracy thing that people were sending children subliminal messages through kids' YouTube videos? I mean, I remember I was really enthralled with all of that because a lot of those videos were actually really bizarre and really disturbing. But I feel like there was never any clear or concise answer on exactly what the fuck was going on with all of that. So yeah, does anybody have any information about what happened to ElsaGate, or if anybody ever faced any consequences for putting all this weird shit into kids' minds on YouTube? That was truly just a bizarre and disturbing situation, and yeah, if you guys want me to make a rundown of exactly what Elsagate is, let me know and I can do it.
Was killed for a sweatpants when I was only 17. My name is Brian, and I'm a 17-year-old French boy. It all happened on December 8, 2023, when I went to a park to sell my Nike jogging suit. When I got there were 6 people in balaclavas with the intention of taking the sweatpants suit without paying. I defended myself as best I could, and one of the assailants stabbed me in the thigh. They then fled with the jogging suit, despite over an hour of cardiac massage. I succumbed to my injuries. My attacker confided that he had gone home crying. He told his mother that he had done something horrible. He is racked with guilt and is said to have threatened suicide. I died because I just wanted to sell a jogging suit to make a little pocket money. My life was turned upside down. I had my whole life ahead of me. My family is completely shattered. For the moment, no one has been tried for my murder. What sentence do you think they deserves?
This is the scariest story about the new parents, and it's absolutely chilling. There was a kid named Michael who was coming downstairs for breakfast one morning. When he sat down at the table to eat, his mom and dad both looked at him and said good morning. Michael then said good morning back, but they continued to talk to him. Michael then noticed that something just wasn't right. He noticed his parents were never this nice, especially in the morning. He then asked them if they were okay, and they both looked at him with a smile on their face and said, "Yes, honey, of course we are." Michael then finished breakfast and went back upstairs. But as he was walking back to his room, he noticed that one of the hallway doors was cracked open a little bit. Michael then went over to close it when he suddenly smelled something absolutely terrible. He then opened the door, and what he saw made his stomach drop to the floor. Inside were his mom and dad's dead body with their throats slit and multiple stab wounds all around their body. Michael then heard a voice behind him say, "You were never supposed to see that. Now we have to do it to you."
19-year-old man raped me when I was 98 years old. On March 3rd, 2018, while I was living in Guadeloupe and preparing to go to sleep, I went to do my nightly routine, then entered my bedroom. Unbeknownst to me, Jean-Francois was hiding behind a curtain in my room, waiting for the right moment to act. As I entered the room, he decided to attack, jumping on me and raping me before fleeing immediately. Unfortunately, I couldn't do anything. His face was covered with a white scarf, so I immediately contacted the police and a DNA sample was taken. However, it did not yield any results to find my assailant. For 3 years, the case remained unsolved until 2021, when the DNA that the investigators had collected matched that of a certain Jean-Francois, already known for 2 previous rapes. He had a tattoo on his face, hence his need to hide his face with a white scarf. He was then arrested on Tuesday, April 18, 2023, in Paris, but he denies being the perpetrator of my rape. However, the evidence suggests otherwise. What punishment does he deserve?
Killed my sister when she was only 4 years old to hurt my mother. My name is Paris Bennett, and I was only 13 at the time. I lived in Texas, and as a child, I played a lot with my little sister. I loved her very much. However, one day in 2007, my mother left us with a babysitter while she went to work. I convinced the babysitter that I could take care of my sister on my own, so she left. And that's when the project I'd been planning for a long time began. I suffocated her, abused her, and finally ended my sister's life by stabbing her 17 times with a kitchen knife. But murdering my sister was more complicated than I imagined. I knew I'd go to prison, but I also knew that with the loss of her precious children, my mother would suffer far more than if I killed her. So, shortly afterwards, I called the police and told them I'd killed my sister by mistake. I told them I'd had a hallucination. But after a while, I confessed to having committed a calculated crime. I was sentenced to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years, the maximum sentence for a minor.
These parents killed their kids because they thought they would come back to life. Okay, so it was late COVID period, and the older sister Alicia, who was 27, learned some superstition rituals online and read many books, and she started taking it extremely seriously and convinced her parents and younger sister to believe her. Now there's 2 sides of the story that could have happened. One, the parents believed the 2 daughters were possessed by some spirits, and they just killed them hoping they'd come back to life. And the other and most popular one is that Alekia convinced both of her parents to kill her and her sister because they would come back to life. The parents then bludgeoned their 2 daughters to death, believing full-heartedly that they would come back to life within 24 hours. Her younger sister was hit in the head to death by a dumbbell, and Alekia was killed by a trident. And after killing both of their kids, the parents just patiently waited for their daughters to come back to life. That's when the police walked in on the gruesome scene and arrested them. This might just sound so insane you might not believe that people could actually do something like this, but it was a time in the world where everything was extremely fragile and nobody knew what was going on. So this family literally just went down a rabbit hole on rituals and spells, and completely believed it and acted on it. This case is extremely disturbing, and I know a bunch of you have never heard about it, so let's talk about it.
I'm the first priest to be executed in the electric chair. My name is Hans Schmidt. I was born in Germany in 1881. Motivated by my family from an early age, I began my journey to become a priest. Already a priest, I moved to the United States in 1909 when I was 28. It was there that I met Anna Oemuller, a new housekeeper at my church. It was love at first sight. I began a secret relationship with Anna. As you know, in my day, to be a priest you had to practice celibacy. Not only did I break my vow of chastity, I married her in secret. I was the priest of my own secret marriage, something completely forbidden by the church. But the real problem began when Anna got pregnant. This double life caused me great confusion. She was very excited by the news, but with a child it would be impossible for me to maintain my double life, and I would have to abandon the church. On September 2, 1913, I chose God. That day, I waited for Anna to fall asleep so I could cut her throat. Then I cut her body into pieces. I wrapped it in sheets and threw it into a nearby river. A week later, Anna's body was found by children playing in the river. And a few days later, I was arrested because the sheets I'd used to wrap Anna's body had come from an expensive New York store, and only a few had been sold. I was sentenced to the electric chair.
This bride-to-be was shot to death on her wedding day. After looking forward to this day for her whole life, Gladys Rickard was brimming with excitement. It was the 26th of September 1999, and she looked absolutely stunning in her wedding dress. She was taking photos in her living room with her bridesmaids. The 39-year-old was preparing to get into a limo which would take her to marry her fiancé, accountant James Preston Jr., although tragically she would never make it down the aisle. Gladys had previously dated a man named Augustin Garcia. They had begun dating back in 1992, but he'd been abusive to her and cheated on her, so she left. Although she had clearly met someone new and had moved on, Augustin had been stalking her. Gladys had to report this to the police one day when Augustin turned up at her house and was banging on the windows and doors. In a horrific foreshadowing of events to occur, one day Augustin left a Bible and white flowers on her front lawn. Now, in the Dominican community, this apparently symbolizes death. Before Gladys was able to leave the house on her wedding day, Augustin burst in. He had driven from his home in Washington Heights and opened fire at Gladys. She was shot several times before Augustin had to try and reload his weapon. Gladys's brother bravely tackled him to the ground and held him there until police arrived. Sadly, it was too late for Gladys. Augustin was given life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. This man ran up to a building, banging on the windows, screaming, "Help me, I'm gonna die." He was killed by the last person anyone expected. Grant Wilson was a 34-year-old Uber driver from Illinois. He had gone to a Walmart in Stokey on the 30th of May 2017, just after 3 a.m. to collect a passenger. He was actually already just a block away, so it was quite a quick trip for him to just go to that store. The passenger was 16-year-old Eliza Wasney. She'd actually got a different Uber already to that Walmart just prior to 3 a.m, and what the police found later on CCTV stunned them. She had calmly walked through the store, picked up a knife and a machete, and left without paying. After leaving, she had requested Grant's Uber and he picked her up. Not long into this second journey, Eliza launched an unprovoked attack on him. He fled the vehicle covered in blood after being hacked with the weapons. He ran up to a condo and desperately banged on the windows and doors, pleading for help. He had multiple injuries to the right side of his arm, torso, head and chest. Police raced to the scene and found Grant almost unconscious. He told police what had happened and described his attacker, and then was rushed to hospital where he sadly passed away. Meanwhile, police were on a desperate hunt to find his killer. Now, there was a trail of blood leading to Grant's crashed car. They found Eliza a block away, dressed in just a bra and leggings, holding her bloody weapons. She refused to drop them, so she was tasered and arrested. She was charged with first-degree murder and strangely had no history of violence prior. She was given 27 years in prison and has never revealed the motive for her attack. Imagine you're having a normal takeaway evening with a friend. Moments after you wave them off, they're killed. 18-year-old Kim Newson from Lincoln was reported missing by her dad on March the 7th, 2002. Her last known movements had been in the early hours of March the 5th. She had been with her friend Mandy that night. The pair had bought a takeaway from Charcoal Grill in Clasket Gate and then eating kebabs together at Mandy's house. From CCTV, police were able to see that the pair had gone to Mandy's at 1:48 a.m. Kim had then left Mandy's house and gone back to her flat on Monks Road between 2:30 a.m. and 2:45 a.m. It was only roughly 100 yards back to her home, but unfortunately this would be the last journey that Kim would make. It was a complete mystery what had happened to the teenager. A month later, Stephen Hughes was arrested in connection with an unrelated case. Shockingly, police actually found Kim's birth certificate with his bloodied footprint on it in his coat pocket. It transpired that on her short walk home, Stephen had actually hit Kim in the head with an axe. He then dragged her body back to his flat. There, he chopped up her body and dumped her in the river with them. Heartbreakingly, at this time, she was actually pregnant. Stephen tried and failed to cover up his crime. He'd gone to the trouble of cleaning and even redecorating his flat, but it was no match for forensic science. Traces of her blood were found in tiles in the flat. He was sentenced to life in prison, and in 2019, he died in hospital.
This is one of the scariest and saddest stories that I've heard in a while. This is Ross MacDonald. He was an Irish filmmaker and Emmy-winning director and cinematographer. Ross went missing on the evening of November 4th of this year. He was last seen leaving his Brooklyn apartment riding his bike. When he didn't return home or have any contact with his friends or family, he was reported missing. Shortly after, the New York Police Department found Ross's bike locked up at Fort Tilden Beach in Queens, and it truly seemed as if he vanished into thin air. But on November 17th, police responded to a call at Breezy Point Beach, and when they arrived, they walked into a gruesome scene. There on the beach, laying in the sand, was a headless and armless torso with just its legs attached. It was very clear that the body was dismembered, and the head and arms have still not been located. Based on a distinctive birthmark and a pair of red Adidas swim trunks, the body was determined to belong to Ross, and other pieces of his clothing were also found on the beach. Although his cause of death has not yet been determined, police do not suspect any foul play. They've also stated that there is no indication of suicide. A lot of people are suspicious of these findings because Ross's body was dismembered, but according to the NYPD, they believe that Ross went for a swim that night and simply drowned. And they believe that since he was in the water for 2 weeks, he was dismembered by the strong tides, sharp rocks, and marine life. According to Ross's friends, it wasn't unusual for him to go for evening swims, so that paired with the fact that other pieces of his clothing were washed ashore has led authorities to believe he just went for a swim that night and was overtaken by the current. Of course, this is still ongoing and the police are still investigating the case, but this is extremely scary and sad for Ross and his friends and family.
Have you ever wondered what it would look like if 8 billion humans stood side by side? Well, if so, then watch this video.
these children did to a teenager in Ireland is absolutely shocking. Anastasia Kriegel, known as Anna, was a Russian-Irish teenager. It was 2018 and she was 14 years old at the time. She was born in Russia and had been placed in an orphanage. She'd then been adopted by a couple in Ireland. She grew up there and seemed happy, but her life was far from plain sailing from then on. She actually had a tumour that she had to have removed from her right ear, which left her almost deaf. She also had issues with her vision. She struggled at school and cruel children bullied her for being adopted. On the 14th of May 2018, things would get even more dark. Now, Anna had actually been trying to go to counselling sessions to try and help her cope. On the day in question, she went to her counselling session after school and got changed. She then had a visitor at around 5 p.m. that evening, which her mum knew was unusual. Anna didn't really have friends that would come to call for her. Now, the boy who came to the house is known as only Boy B. He's believed to have come to the house to lure Anna to the park to meet another teen who is called Boy A. She walked with Boy B and the pair were captured on CCTV. They headed over to an abandoned house on a nearby farm. She was last seen alive at 5:30 p.m. in St. Catherine's Park. Tragically, on the 17th of May, Anna's body was found in that abandoned building near Lucan. She was found unclothed and her cause of death was blunt force trauma. The autopsy showed signs that she'd been SA'd and she had tape round her neck. Anna's mum told the police of the boy who had come to the house for Anna, and police soon arrested the two boys A and B. Luckily, there was plenty of DNA evidence at the scene and on Anna to help them identify the boys. They couldn't be named during the trial due to only being 13 years old and were granted a lifelong anonymity. It transpired that Boy A SA'd Anna as Boy B watched. Then Boy A attacked her and they both fled. They were actually the youngest people in the history of the Republic of Ireland to be charged with murder. Boy A got life with a review after 12 years and Boy B got 15 years with a review after 8.
These are the most disturbing cartel execution videos on the internet, part 1. This video is called Ghost Rider, and it's one of the most infamous cartel execution videos, and I really don't recommend looking or searching for it because it's 100% one of the worst. The video was recorded in September 2020, and the victim's name is Ghost Rider, and he was apparently tortured over 3 days. And he was subjected to some of the worst acts of violence you will ever see. The video is about 2 minutes long, and it begins with Ghost Rider already in a horrible state. It appears his face has already been flayed, which means skinned, and what the killers do next is absolutely horrible. They get rubbing alcohol and pour it on his face, and keep in mind, his face has already been skinned, so just imagine the stinging pain. We all put rubbing alcohol on cuts, and we all know how bad it hurts. So just imagine having your face skinned and then somebody pours rubbing alcohol all over it. After this, the killers then set Ghost Rider's face on fire, and his face is then completely covered in flames and is absolutely melting away right before your eyes. You hear the cartel members laughing and mocking him as he burns and his face melts. Ghost Rider is letting out blood-curdling screams as the flames continue. The video then skips to later on in the day or a couple days later, and Ghost Rider has been tortured and burned so severely that his whole head is basically a red skull. There's no skin, there's no hair, there's no facial features, you can't even see his eyes. And after all of this, he is still alive. At the end of the video, they tell him to raise his head, which he does, which confirms he was still alive, and I have no idea how somebody can live through all of this torture. They then set his head on fire again to make him look like Ghost Rider with his burning skull. And seeing his exposed red skull burning is a very disturbing sight. Apparently the guy was nicknamed Ghost Rider because he would do the same thing to people that he caught, which was the main reason they killed him in this exact way. This video is just horrible and extremely gruesome, and it's a video you should definitely stay curious on because in my opinion, it's that bad.
Do you notice anything strange about this picture of these Nottingham newlyweds? Debbie Starbuck was last seen alive 6 days after her wedding. It was April 2010 and the new bride was just 41 years old. She'd got married to 36-year-old Jamie Starbuck, and as you can see in their pictures from their wedding, they were beaming. However, just a week after this photo was taken, Debbie faced a tragic end. Jamie was divorced and met Debbie online. The pair lived together in a house in Nottingham. Debbie was self-employed, and after her mum sadly passed away, she inherited over £100,000. Debbie's friends and family alerted police to a potential problem 2 years after last seeing her. They hadn't actually heard from Debbie properly in a while. They'd had a few emails from her here and there, but hadn't actually spoken to her on the phone. After Debbie and Jamie had got married, they believed that the pair had gone abroad. Investigators started looking into the pair's whereabouts and found that Debbie's passport had actually expired. Interestingly, money had been transferred from Debbie's account to Jamie's. Police discovered that Jamie was living a lavish life, travelling all over the world, but there was no sign of Debbie. It transpired that Jamie had travelled to a total of 32 countries within 31 months. He'd left the UK to travel to Amsterdam in 2010 just after his wedding and was keeping a travel blog. He documented his travels and apparently what him and Debbie were up to. Now, his wife's family were also receiving emails from her, and by the sounds of things, she was living a absolutely dream life. In Jamie's final blog post, he wrote, "I left the UK a long time ago in search of, well, in all honesty, I was running away from life and responsibility, justice and my past." It turned out he'd been using his wife's passwords to pose as her and make it out like she was still alive when he knew she was dead. He'd killed her a week after their wedding, dismembered her and then burned her remains. Shockingly, police found an entry in his computer stating, "I had planned for it to be quick. I never expected you to be so durable." He had spent his deceased wife's money on his lavish travels and subsequently was arrested. Police captured him as he stepped off a plane from Brazil. He was jailed for life.
Stephen A. Marshall was a 20-year-old vigilante murderer who some have dubbed the pedophile killer. Stephen lived a pretty normal life. His family separated when he was younger. He was born in Texas, but at the time of the murders, he had been living in Nova Scotia, Canada for years, which is very close to Maine, where his father lived and where the murders would eventually take place. Now, one day in 2006, Stephen went AWOL. He kind of disappeared. He took all of the money out of his bank account and he drove to Maine to, quote, visit his father. But it turns out that Stephen had actually looked up the Maine Sex Offenders Registry, had taken down information on 29 of the sex offenders, and had created almost a hit list of people he wanted to take out. Shortly before the murders happened, Stephen had converted to Christianity and he had referred to pedophiles to some of his friends as scum of the earth. His first target was a man named Joseph Gray, pictured here, who was 57 years old. He had been previously convicted of sexually assaulting a child under the age of 14, and for some reason, Stephen chose him to be the first victim. He showed up to Joseph's house out in the middle of the woods in the middle of the night and shot him to death on his couch. Before he was murdered, Joseph had fallen asleep watching Forensic Files, which is just an interesting twist because that's a show about murder and solving crimes. But Stephen wasn't done that night. He still had more targets to hit. At 8 o'clock the next morning, he showed up to 24-year-old William Elliott's trailer home. He knocked on the door, and when William answered, he shot him to death. William had been previously convicted of having sex with a girl who was 16 years old when he was 19. It was his girlfriend, and that had landed him on the sex offender registry. So in just one night, Stephen Marshall had taken out both of these men, and he then boarded a bus to go to another location. Police were quickly able to identify Stephen as the killer because the girlfriend of one of the victims had taken a photo of his license plate after the killings. And when the police stopped the bus that he was on board, he pulled out a pistol and took his own life. When all was said and done and the police looked at his laptop, they discovered that he had scoped out the houses of 4 other predators that were on that sex offenders list. Who knows how many more murders he was planning on carrying out or could have carried out if he hadn't been apprehended at that time. If you like true crime, you can listen to my wife and I's podcast, Murder in America. It's on all streaming platforms, or you can check out my YouTube channel, The Paranormal Files.
This is a story that everyone should know. This is Lizbeth Medina. She was a 16-year-old high school cheerleader who was found stabbed to death in her bathtub on December 5th. This is everything we know so far. On December 5th, Lizbeth's mom became worried about her after she didn't show up for an annual lighted Christmas parade in Edna, Texas. Lizbeth was supposed to be marching in the parade with her cheer squad, and when her mom couldn't find her, she rushed back to their home around 7 p.m. at the Cottonwood Apartments, and it was there that she discovered a gruesome scene. Lizbeth had been stabbed to death, and she was left in her bathtub. It was clear that she had been getting ready for the parade, and she was still in her pajamas. Edna police started looking for any leads because Lizbeth was just 16 years old. She didn't have any enemies, and this completely shocked the small community. Authorities soon discovered grainy surveillance footage of a possible suspect in the area, and they also disclosed a vehicle of interest, which was a silver Ford Taurus. Finally, on Saturday, police were given a tip which sent them to the small town of Schulenburg, Texas, and it was there that they arrested 23-year-old Rafael Romero at his family home. Authorities have confirmed that Raphael does own a silver Ford Taurus, which they've seized evidence from linking him to Lisbeth. According to Edna police, Raphael has been living in Texas illegally on an expired visa, while his family has been living in Schulenburg for about 5 years. At this point, police have not discovered a motive for the killing, and they're trying to figure out if the two even knew each other. But they are saying that it is an isolated incident. Lisbeth's family has stated that they don't recognize Raphael or his family at all, but they do wonder if this was possibly related to a recent break-in attempt. Lisbeth's mom said that a few weeks before her murder, someone tried breaking into their home, and it's now left them wondering if this was the same intruder who may have tried breaking in again, but was taken by surprise that Lisbeth was home. Raphael has since been booked into the Jackson County Jail and charged with capital murder. This story is just absolutely heartbreaking. Lisbeth's mom had her when she was just 16 years old herself. She said that they grew up together, and it was just them against the world. The two had just moved to Edna last year, which makes the story even more heartbreaking. Lisbeth was described as bubbly, happy, and confident, and she dreamed of becoming a nurse. Her face lit up whenever she cheered for her high school, and she'll be very missed. This should have never happened. I've attached a GoFundMe set up for the Medina family to help get them through this horrific time. And if you'd like to show your support and keep up to date with the information on the case, go follow the Facebook group Justice for Lisbeth Medina.
What happened after this girl took this webcam selfie is truly terrifying. It was the 16th of March 2012 in Morgan Hill, California. Sierra Lamar was a 15-year-old student just about to leave to go to school that day. She was a popular cheerleader with loads of friends. Prior to leaving for school, she quickly took a selfie on her computer webcam, then left to head for the bus. It was on the way to the bus stop that she seemingly vanished into thin air. She never turned up for school that day, which was extremely unusual for Sierra, and the last time she was heard of via text was 7:11 a.m. that morning. She had texted her friend and it seemed like everything was normal, but at 6 p.m. that afternoon, her mum found out she had never got to school. Unnervingly, it wasn't long before her phone was found in a nearby field. This was very concerning for her family, but police maintain they didn't expect foul play. However, when more of her belongings were discovered, concern around the community spread that something horrible may have happened. A pink, juicy bag was found at the side of the road and inside was some neatly folded clothing. Locals banded together on the hunt for the missing teenager. Interestingly, Sierra's dad was actually a registered S offender, but he was ruled out early on. Time went on with seemingly no leads, and heartbreakingly, Sierra's English teacher kept her desk empty for the rest of that year. Meanwhile, Sierra's belongings that had been found were sent for testing. This is when police had a breakthrough. The forensic team found that DNA from her genes matched 21-year-old Antolin Garcia Torres. His DNA was luckily already on police databases from when he'd been charged for previous crimes, including battery. Investigators secretly surveilled him to collect evidence, and after 2 months they arrested him. His car was captured on CCTV the morning that Sierra had vanished. Police seized the vehicle and found her DNA on the door handle as well as a strand of her hair. There was an issue though, they still hadn't found Sierra. Although she was presumed dead, they still couldn't locate her body. On the 14th of March 2015, the search for Sierra was stood down. It had been an agonising 3 years for her family. The jury found Antolin guilty of Sierra's murder. He was also found guilty of attempted assaults on 3 women in car parks. He had used a stun gun in one of the assaults and had accidentally dropped it and left his fingerprints on it for police to collect. He got life without parole but has still refused to disclose where Sierra's body is.
These are the worst deaths imaginable, and this one is truly horrifying. On April 10th, 2018, 16-year-old Kyle Plush was in the parking lot of Seven Hills School and drove there in the family's minivan. And he was just there to practice tennis and nothing more. But he went to the 3rd row of the minivan and reached over to grab his tennis equipment. But as he was reaching down, his knee hit the bottom of the seat and something unexpected and truly horrifying happened. So the seat literally flipped and it turned Kyle upside down. So now the upper half of his body was trapped with the seat pressing up against his chest. And at 3:14 p.m. that afternoon, Kyle was able to call 911. And immediately when the 911 operator answered, Kyle immediately started screaming, "Help, help, I'm stuck in my van." The dispatcher kept trying to figure out where Kyle was located and he just kept saying 7 Hills. But the dispatcher couldn't pick up what he was saying after 7 Hills. And in the 911 call, you can actually hear Kyle banging against the window and screaming that he desperately needs help. The call went on for 3 minutes but then got disconnected, and the dispatcher then tried to call Kyle back. But it went straight to voicemail, and at 3:21 p.m. that day, officers were sent to that location Kyle said. They arrived at 3:26 p.m. and searched everything but couldn't find Kyle. And they then closed out the request and just went about their days, as Kyle was still stuck in this awful position. Then at 3:35 p.m., Kyle calls 911 again, saying the same things like, "I'm stuck in my van, please help, this isn't a joke." He then said, "I don't think I have that much time left. Please tell my mom I love her." And the sad part is, officers were still there when he made this call. But for some reason, this information was not given to the officers. Just to give you a visual, the Star was where Kyle Plush was parked. And I don't know exactly where the officers were searching in this area, but they obviously didn't find him. And 6 hours after his first 911 call, his father went to the school and found him. Kyle was dead, and he died a slow and painful death from asphyxia due to chest compressions. It's just honestly insane that nobody saw him, especially because his feet were visible. The job the dispatcher and the police did was just awful. I don't know how they couldn't find him, and it's actually rage-inducing. The 911 operator was also investigated but was not fired. This case is absolutely horrifying, and may Kyle Plush rest in peace.